Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about conflating player skill with player character skill. Now, I'm answering a question by Volforak, who asks, how to resolve the conflict between player skill and their character's ability in an action RPG. To elaborate with an example, Fallout in the past was all about skill checks and dice rolls, but starting with Fallout 3, the first-person shooter aspect became more emphasized with each release. Where's the line between letting the player be a good shot because the game mechanics allow them, and the player being a good shot because they built a character that is a good shot? First of all, that's a good question. Second, I apologize. The beast is snoring super loudly. I didn't shut the door in time, so just live with that. I could have sworn that I'd answered this question before, and I scoured my channel because I had a memory of talking about it. Then I realized that I talked about this exact topic as one of the 7 mistakes people make when they're designing an RPG. So let's take a quick look at that so I don't repeat myself.
Similar to the last one is a mistake. I made this in a lot of my games. You conflate player skill with character skill. And this image is a good example of player skill. It's what I said. It's like you've got your reticle dead set on somebody in a game, and he's not moving, you're not moving, the reticle's not moving, and you press fire and this happens. And you're like, how did that happen? How did the bullet go around him? And the problem is you've conflated something that the player is controlling with an underlying character skill. So what I always do in my games now is I break down everything that I think the player is going to be able to control, and I call that a player skill. And then all the other ones are called character skills. And when I actually put skills in for the player character, they only control the areas that the player doesn't feel like he has direct involvement in. For example, aiming is always going to be player controlled. I don't want to, I've done this in my past games. I'm not going to do any more where the reticle moves around. I think it did that in Vampire. I'm not going to do the other thing where even though your reticle's on you, there's a big spread around it. So even though my reticle's on you, I may miss because the fiction is, well, you're going to hit anywhere in this inner circle. Instead, what I did is I put things like, okay, recoil will be controlled by the character skills. So as you put more points into, say, your shotgun skill, after you shoot it and the shotgun goes like this, the speed at which it comes back, the recoil, is sped up. The player doesn't feel like he's controlling that, but he sees an immediate reaction to, like, he put new points in there, and now his shotgun's coming back faster. Until finally, when he's at max shotgun skill, the shotgun just kind of goes, boom, really just kind of shakes a little bit, and he's immediately ready to fire again. It has the mathematical, the mathematical result that you want, which is the player will be doing more damage per second because he'll be able to fire more frequently. But it's much more psychologically satisfying to the player, because he's feeling like the aiming is completely under his control, and the shotgun is getting more and more under his control as his skill goes up, but it doesn't feel like something he as the player is making happen. It's something he's putting points into in his character. Similarly, remember the critical hits I just talked about? That should be critical. That should be under character control as well, or character skill. Whether that's a skill or a perk that makes you get more damage as you go up, the player puts points into that or buys extra perks, and then they see themselves doing more critical hit damage, not critically hitting more frequently.
Alrighty, so that was me at Reboot 2017, talking about player skill and versus character skill. And the summary is, any actions that feel like they're controlled by the player, those are player skills. And any actions that the player doesn't feel like he's directly in control of, those are character skills. And the skills that you design to put into your game should be character skills. Now, I haven't always done that. I believe, you know, when I mentioned in the talk that in Vampire, the worse your skill, your combat skill was, you just got a bigger reticle, and when you shot, it didn't shoot at what was at the target, the crosshair. It shot anywhere in the reticle. And that just didn't feel as good. So one of the things we did, like in Outer Worlds, was we said, okay, there are certain things that are player controlled, like a melee weapon. If you hit with a sword, that's a player controlled skill. If you're within range of somebody, within range of your melee weapon, and you're aimed at them and your arc goes through them, you hit. You hit. There's no roll. There's no checking. If you're too far away, if they're on the other side of the room and you're doing this, you do not hit. But if they're right in front of you, you hit. But how much damage do you do with that swing? That's controlled by your melee skill. So that's a character skill. That's something you can put points in. And as you put more points into it, you don't hit more often, but your hits do more damage. That has the mathematical result we want, which is as you put points into skills, your character is getting better, measurably better damage output with the weapon that uses that skill that they just increased. Now, something I don't mention in that video is that this should apply to non-combat skills as well. It shouldn't just be combat skills that the player feels like they have some control over. For example, let's say you're playing a role-playing game and you enter a room and there's a big puddle of blood on the ground. Now, it would be really annoying if you hovered over it and it allowed no interaction because your search skill or your observation skill or your, medical skill, whatever controls looking at that blood. If that skill wasn't high enough, it would be really weird if it didn't let you interact with that at all. That would be bad. So a better design would be, you can always see the blood and you always get to click on the blood. If you walk up to it, you get an interaction, but the information you get back is dependent on your skill. If you have a very low skill, it'll just go, that's blood. If you have a higher skill, it may go, that's blood, and it's still wet. It hasn't coagulated. That blood has been there less than an hour. If you have a really high skill, it may go, wow, if that blood came from one person and the splatter makes it look like it was, that's more blood than a person can lose and still live. That person is dead and was killed within the last hour. You just give them more information because their character skill is better. Similarly, if you have like a safe in the room, don't let the player not interact with the safe if their lockpicking skill isn't high enough. They can always interact with it, but the lockpicking skill itself, if you want to put a lockpicking game in there, the lockpicking controls, the skill controls how hard that lockpicking minigame is. If you don't want to do a minigame, then yes, there's some minimum skill you need to be able to pick that lock. But not interacting with the lock at all, that's not fun. So, and by the way, and I didn't mention it at the Reboot conference either, when I say skill, it could be anything. I'm not talking directly skill. Actually, I do think I brought it up because I mentioned perks. But what I mean is anything that you put points into in your character, whether it's attributes, perks, anything, those can all, that's what I mean when I say that's the character skill. That's the thing you're checking against to let the player do more damage, let the player do more critical hit damage, let the player get more information from something he's interacting with. That's the skill you check. Whether it's a perk or an attribute, I don't care. It's that thing. It's that thing that's on the character. Also, this conflation issue is way more of a problem on first-person games like action RPGs and shooters, because in a turn-based isometric game, there are so many layers of abstraction there that the player kind of understands that whether or not he's going to hit with this gun is dependent on his character and not the little crosshair that you have as your cursor that you click on somebody. And I mean, they should know that, because if it's a turn-based game, certainly they don't think that everybody's just standing there like this waiting for their turn. No, it's an abstraction. So the more abstracted your game is, the more people will buy that player skill and character skill can be conflated. But once you go first person, once you make it more of an action game, once you make it more of a sim, people want those two things to be conflated less. They feel like, I'm in charge of this. My character can be in charge of something else. I think this hopefully answers your question. It's something that, depending on what kind of game you're making, how abstract your game is, that's how far apart you need to make player and character skills be in your design. But a good feedback, of course, is listening to your testers in QA, people in focus groups, see what it is they're feeling when they play the game, and see if any of that is you conflating player skill with character skill, and then see how you can separate the two. Anyway, I hope this answers your question.